There's a verse found in Matthew 6:22. It says, "The eye is the lamp of the body." So then if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Now, I'll talk a little bit this morning about, there's messages that are, how would you say, evangelistic, that draw people back from the brink of going the wrong directions. There's messages that are inspirational, that inspire you to make a change in your life and go into this direction. And then there's informational messages. I think this one falls in there. I don't know that there's maybe there's inspiration in this. I hope there is, because I would love to see you be inspired to go in a good direction of some kind if you're going in the wrong direction. But it's almost maybe more just something to ruminate about, something to think about, and something to just kind of broaden your horizons, if you will. And what I want to speak about this morning is perspective. Perspective. And I was wishing, Alyssa is here this morning, and I was wishing Heidi could be here this morning, and I was going to ask them in art. I think those are the most well-known art people. I'm not saying there's not other art people here, but artists, I guess is what they call them, not art people. And it would be very interesting to hear their perspective on perspective. So Heidi's not here, so maybe I'll just ask Alyssa. She doesn't know anything about this. This is totally sprung on her. But as an artist, can you explain perspective?
In what way?
Just use your own perspective of perspective.
I guess I could use an example. I once had a piece of art I was working on. It was a portrait. I was going off of a photo, and to me it looked okay until I flipped the paper this way. Because I had drawn it from the perspective that I was looking at it laying down, and the table was too high, so I couldn't tell that it was skewed. So when I brought it back up, the entire thing, top of it was just like... So looking at it, you can tell from a certain angle, oh, that looked normal. But as soon as you bring it up, you're like, wow, it's a big head. So I mean, something like that. So if you're
drawing things at an angle, your perspective is a little skewed because you don't usually view that picture at an angle. Like if you hang that picture up on the wall at that angle, it'd be fine.
Mm-hmm. Just like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else?
What else are you looking for?
Well, can you, if you see a picture, can you tell pretty quickly if it's out of perspective?
Usually. Yeah. You can tell by the way the lines are. Sometimes curved, sometimes a little wobbly. You can usually tell.
So an artist probably can instinctively see when something's out of perspective, right?
If they didn't do it themselves, yes.
Yeah.
If they did it themselves, it takes a little bit to finally realize it is out.
Is there something like a good artist that has no perspective at all?
It would be a different type of art. It wouldn't be realistic, but yeah.
Yeah. There are artists, modern artists, and other artists that have...
Or they use it for a specific reason.
Yeah. They have very little perspective knowledge, but it's part of their art, right?
Yeah, or even if they do have a good base on it, sometimes they do art that's specifically meant to look terrible for a reason. Kind of weird, but...
Yeah. Very good. That's, yeah, good, thank you. There's so many... So perspective, as for an artist's point of view, perspective is actually a science. It's not actually art. Like you can guarantee the perfect perspective on a building if you know exactly your eye point versus where it's ending up, where the horizon is, and a computer can come up with the exact perfect perspective of all the different, like if you do a 3D rendering of something, a computer can figure out because there is science behind perspective. However, an artist very quickly just instinctively knows if something's out of perspective or in perspective. So I drew a couple little things here for fun. One question I had was, it's not a really fair question because I should have spent more time on this picture here. It's a very complex picture. The question I have is this a 3D drawing or a 2D drawing? So in perspective, you have dimensions. You have 3 dimensions, you have 2 dimensions, or 1 dimension. Maybe this is a 1-dimensional drawing. And I'm not going to ask because I didn't draw it very well. And most people would say this is a 1-dimensional, or would that be fair? It's a 1-dimensional drawing. But it actually is a 3-dimensional drawing. I was just too close to get any other dimensions. Does that make sense? Like you can't see the side of the building because you're too close. Now, if I would have done it perfectly right, I would have drawn the sides of those eaves in, and then you can see it's a 3D drawing. It's just something to think. Again, this is not really, I don't know that this is to make a huge point, but it's to stimulate our thinking on perspectives in life. So this one is pretty clearly a 3-dimensional drawing. You're looking at it from the top, kind of at an angle downward. So you can see a little bit of the roof and kind of the sides, and it works out. Like if I would have taken that bottom line and kicked it downward, you're like, that would have been out of perspective. It wouldn't have worked. Here's another one. This is a different perspective, a different angle from whatever that we're looking at. Now, here's a car with a sign and mountains in the background, and the other one is of an airplane. You know you're a bad artist when you need to explain your drawings. But you get the idea. So I'm just going to quick whiz. I hope I know how to get back. That's me in an airplane. That is the gauges on the airplane there. Now, the question is, how do I go backwards? There we go. Okay. So, see all those gauges there? Why is that? Anybody want to take a guess why an airplane, and I'm going to go back to this page here, why an airplane has all those gauges versus your car? Like it has a gauge to tell you if you're going, I don't think you can see my pointer, yeah. There's a gauge to tell you if you're going up, if you're going down. The gauge that goes down tells you, there's another gauge on the side, it tells you how many feet you're dropping. There's a gauge that tells you if your wings are level. There's just a lot of gauges. Anybody have any idea why very easy to get disoriented. Why is it easy to get disoriented?
Because some of the things you use to adjust your perspective are not up there.
Right. There's so many things that when we're driving a car, and this came up as a discussion, that some of this comes from a discussion we had at the cabin this weekend. In fact, one of the guys had a devotional about perspective, so this is coming from that. In a vehicle, you have so many reference points to tell you where you're going. You have mountains in the background, you have a horizon, you have the road, you have kind of how you feel in your seat, you look out. If you're not sure, you can look out the side, and it kind of gives you depth there. There's so many things that are solid around you, it gives you a lot of perspective. In an airplane, especially when it's foggy, or whatever situation you're in, you literally can be flying sideways and kind of pulling up, and it feels like you're even because the G-forces are just right, and you don't notice it. You can't fly by the seat of your pants because you have no horizon. If you have a horizon, you need not as many instruments because you can have something to guide yourself by. But the story came from the guy that was sharing this said one day he was going to work, and it was very foggy around him, and he's driving along, and all of a sudden he said he could feel that he was going uphill, and it was so foggy around him. It was dark, foggy. He could see in front of him, but he could feel he was going uphill. But all of a sudden he said, you know how it feels when your truck downshifts and the exhaust brake goes on, like it's trying to pull you back. And he said he could feel it downshift, and it, like, the exhaust brake came on, and he's like, why? Why is this happening? I'm going uphill. And all of a sudden he felt it shift down again, and it was really pulling backward. And he was so confused why this is happening if you're going uphill. And all of a sudden it came to him that he is actually going downhill. And somehow, just the way the fog was, just the way the road was, just the way everything was about it, it had disoriented him enough that he was actually going downhill versus uphill. And it kind of like stimulated something in his mind. He started thinking. And this is a very poor graph, and I don't know that it's scriptural. Okay? But it's generally how we think of perspectives. It's God's perspective, it's man's perspective, and it's the devil's perspective of whatever's going on. So I just want to have a little bit of a discussion about that. So again, thinking of that verse, if your eye is evil, and you don't have a single eye, and your eye is evil, and your eye is the light that comes into you. What if your perspective would be skewed? Well, then the light within you is actually not real. It's a skewed reality. And when I would ask somebody right now, it's like, so here in this church, right now, what is your perspective? Let me ask Yvonne. So right now, with your eyes, physically, what's your perspective of this church building? Like, what are you seeing? Or what can you see in general? Like, from where you're sitting, where you're at, what's your perspective?
Walls and ceiling, benches.
Do you see a preacher?
Yeah.
Do you see a screen? Yeah, you see a screen up there?
Yeah.
I don't see it. Well, I see parts of it.
Yeah.
Anybody else? What do you see? Like right now, your viewpoint of this church. Like, what's your view?
I see a stone wall.
Stone wall? I don't see a stone wall. You're wrong, Junior. There is no stone wall in this building. I don't see one stone wall. Okay? Is Junior right, or is he wrong? Because I don't see a stone wall. Well, I see some really nice wooden doors. Sarah, do you see nice wooden doors? No. Well, you must really need some eye salve, because I can see some really nice wooden doors. Like I see a camera light on. It's got a red dot. Can you guys see that? No? Whoa, I can see it really plainly. It's right there in front of me. It's like right there. I mean, can't you guys see that? You guys can't see that red light on the camera? Why not? Like, come on. We're all in this together, aren't we? You need to agree with me. Oh no, you're honestly saying you can't see that. Is it starting to see how perspective works in life? I have a question, like what shapes our perspective? So we were just talking of physically, we were all 100% correct. You saw a stone wall. I completely do not see a stone wall. I see a red light on the camera. None of you sees the red light on the camera. And the reason is I have a different perspective of this room than you do. So, who's right? You're kind of right from your perspective. I'm kind of right from my perspective. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's just stay right there. Okay, let's talk about what shapes our perspective in life. Now, as I see physically, that same thing can be happening in my mental mind, in my psyche, in my emotions, whatever. So let's just talk a little bit. What shapes perspective? What shapes these things in life? What shaped your perspective in life? And I'm looking for interaction here. So just pop up as you think of, as you view life in general. What are things that shape that perspective? Life experiences. Influences. Things you listen to. Things you see. You think of it in a different light, maybe. Why is that? Maybe because you heard another perspective, right? Okay.
Childhood
Upbringing. How you were brought up is, I think sometimes I see an older person, and sometimes I think, I wonder what their life story is. Like, I wonder what all they went through. I'm sure they went through rejection, hurt, victories, sorrows, joys. There's a lot of story in that person. So upbringing shapes your perspective. It shapes how you view situations in life. Is there anything else? is the worst thing is going to happen to me. A hopeful person's perspective is that something good is going to happen to me. Yeah? I think gender, whether you're a male or you're a female, I think that changes how you look at situations. I think age can be a factor. Experience, I think that was already brought up. Temperament. So some of us are a very thoughtful, we think things through, we don't take risks, we're very cautious. So we're going to look at a situation of how do we avoid failure here. Where the next person is like, oh, there's so much potential here. You know, we just need to go in 100%. There's so much potential. And the next person's like, oh, I see a big cliff. It's because you're looking at it from a different perspective. Right? Okay. I think we get, our minds are being twisted a little bit in the pretzel of, oh, wow, like the world is very three-dimensional, four-dimensional, and it can be different from different angles. So I wished I would have had enough time to split these up, but I didn't. In governments we have branches of government. One branch is very much their political viewpoint is very much one way. Like they have a viewpoint of the government needs to be more involved in people's lives. There's socialistic, like we want to help poor people up from their poverty. We think government is good. People that are experts are wiser than most people. That's one view of government. So another view of government is the least amount is the best, and the strong survive. And we just want to make it so that people who work hard can rise to the top, and those who don't are down here, and that's fair. So in governments, you have always that mix. Some have a communist bent, some have a socialistic bent, some have a very it'll work out, just let it go bent. And government has been set up to really cater to that, to where there's different viewpoints and different perspectives, and they fight each other over it, and finally one group wins just because there's a majority. Okay? And most governments are either that way, there's a dictator, or there's that situation, or whatever. But each government has one area that they try to really take subjectivity out of it and make it objective. And they try to make one area of their life, or the government branch, there's one area that they try to really not bring in agendas. And I wish the lady wasn't there. Anybody know what that is? I mean, it's kind of obvious, but anybody know what that is? Which branch of the government that we're trying to keep agendas out of? The Justice Department. And why is that? It's because every government tries to either pretend that it is neutral in the Justice Department, or they actually are. But each one wants to always say that's hallowed ground. Like, you cannot bring subjectivity in that. It needs to be objective. And so, you know how you find truth in a justice? So somebody says, okay, so this bad thing happened to me. I want to take this person to court. And God was very careful about this too. He said, anyone who goes to court and lies, bears false witness, basically. It's very important to not lie in court in the Old Testament. That is very hallowed ground. And so in court, you have this disagreement and this disagreement. So now you also have witnesses. And the whole point is you have something in the middle here, and you have this person here standing over here and saying, okay, this is my viewpoint. I was going down the road and I did this and this happened. And then the defendant, or I forget who the different names are, but then the other person says, no, I was going down the road this way and this is what happened. Okay? So now they both say those things. That brings a certain perspective to the thing. But then they call in a third class of people. Anybody? There's like a third and a fourth class of something. Anybody know what the third and fourth class is? So the third class would be maybe, let's call it witnesses. So now you have a person, a disinterested third party, that saw something happen and they give their testimony. Generally speaking, that actually carries more weight because there's no agenda. Both of the others have an agenda. And so they look at it and say, well, I'm a disinterested third party. This is what I saw where I was standing on the street. Then you get another witness that's across the street on the other side. And he says, well, I didn't quite see what he saw. I saw this happen. I saw a blinker on. The other guy's like, I never saw a blinker. Well, then they can, you were on the left side. That's why you saw the blinker. He was turning left. It brings, all of a sudden, they start forming a picture. And what they're trying to do, what are they trying to get at? Does anybody know what we're trying to get at with perspectives? The different perspectives in the justice system. Anybody know what we're trying to get at? Truth. Okay. Jesus said in John 5:30, I can do nothing of my own initiative. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of him who sent me. When Jesus was here, he judged situations, but he was hearing from the Father on the judgment of that. And there's other places that it says, don't judge, lest you be judged. What he's saying is, don't judge from your perspective. Because your perspective is skewed by how you grew up, what angle you saw it, where you were when it happened, how you felt when it happened. There are so many things that can bring different perspectives to it. Jesus said, my judgment is just because I'm hearing it from another source. I don't have skin in the game. I don't seek my will, but I seek the will of him who sent me. Therefore, his judgments were just because he was hearing it from another angle. And again, I don't know how much this message will impact you in the sense of now going out and not sinning or whatever. I think what it can do, though, is bring a little bit of clarity of God's truth and also a little bit of grace for other people that are sitting in the pews with each other. Understanding that my perspective of truth, and here's what I want to end with, truth actually needs no perspective. Truth is like an inanimate. Pilate asked, working with Jesus, and one person said, he's horrible, he needs to be. He blasphemed, he needs to be hung on a cross, he needs to be killed. That was what they were saying from their perspective. Which was a wrong perspective. But then Pilate says, his perspective was, my wife had a dream, and he wanted nothing to do with it. And he asked, what is truth? Like, he asked a pretty profound question, actually. What is truth? And I guess what I'm going to leave you with today is truth. When God sees truth, he doesn't have a perspective. We talked about those 3 mountains, and it's like, well, what is God's perspective on it? What is man's perspective, and what's the devil's perspective? God needs no perspective because he sees right now, he sees the red light on the camera, he sees the stone wall, he sees the wooden doors back there. He sees the front of Yvonne's head, which I can see. He also sees the back of your head. He also knows how many hair you lost or gained or whatever this morning. He sees the bottom of the benches. He sees the top of the benches. In God lies truth. Like, he sees every side of this. There's nothing hidden from him. There's no perspective. It's like God needs no perspective because he sees truth. Truth is what it is. There's no viewpoint from it. So, in order for me to say I have a handle on truth is a little bit, it depends on how closely I'm hearing from God, because he understands every corner of this object, like this pulpit. He sees this corner, this side, all at the same time. So in other words, he sees complete truth. It is completely what truth he sees. So as we think of God, he needs no perspective. We don't even need to convince him about a certain perspective because he sees what truth is. He needs no convincing. It is what it is, and he sees it all. And I guess, like I said, I don't know what this will do for you, but maybe it can create a trust and an awe in God that he needs no perspective. He has a complete understanding of truth. He has a complete understanding of your situation. He has a complete understanding of everything in life. We see through a glass darkly. And we can only, I think the closer we come to Jesus Christ and the more we have a line of communication with him, the more he speaks truth into our life. And when we look at different angles, I had a situation this week with something that I was looking at it from one perspective, but it wasn't a true perspective. It was through a perspective of what I gathered or just putting things together. It wasn't right. It was a wrong perspective. It wasn't true. So, let's give each other a little bit of grace and let's learn from each other, because even though God understands this pulpit or whatever we're looking at it, he can see all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many sides it is. He can see it. We can't. That's why we need brothers and sisters too. That's the other thing I see. Is I look at this truth and I say, well, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I see, and this is what I believe the Lord is telling me. And then Mike looks at it, and he's standing from over here, and he says, well, I see a little bit of a different angle, but I'm kind of one with you, and what you're hearing is kind of what I'm hearing. And then Heather looks at it from over here and she says, well, through being a different gender, I see it a little bit different. But I also hear what you guys are saying, what the Lord's saying, and I'm hearing something a little different. And then you hear from over here, and it's all of a sudden you gain a better perspective of this truth because you heard from a couple more people. Now, we can be completely humanistic in our thinking and not guided by God. And we can look at a situation and we can all agree on what that looks like and be completely wrong. That's why we always need a perspective with God speaking like Jesus did. He says, I don't judge this situation. I don't judge this situation by what I see. I judge it by what I hear. And so, again, hopefully that'll just get our minds stimulated a little bit in different areas of, I really see that we could look at different things with a completely different viewpoint, but what unites us is what we're hearing from God. That brings in unity, because it takes my carefulness and allows me to be a little more aggressive, and it takes this person's aggressiveness and it makes him a little more careful, because we're all tempered by what we're hearing in our hearts from the Word of God and from His Holy Spirit. And then also the awe and the understanding that God completely understands this truth. He needs no perspective, like He understands everything what's going on, is what I want to leave with you. So hopefully that'll get your mind stimulated and give you a different perspective in life. So God bless you in that, and I'll turn it over.